Welcome to our deep dive all about PHP. It's kind of funny how PHP gets labeled as the, old reliable of the web. Yeah. But what really gets me is how much it's evolved over the years. Today we're going to go beyond just like scratching the surface, We're going to uncover why PHP is like so deeply embedded in the web and how it's kept up with the demands of, web development as it's changed so much. I think we'll even find some surprises along the way.
Oh, yeah. I think you'll be surprised. A lot of people just dismiss PHP, but there are some really good reasons why it's still everywhere, even with all these newer, flashier languages.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. The origin story of PHP is almost too perfect. You've got Rasmus Lerdorf back in 1994 just trying to see who's visiting his website.
Right.
And bam, a whole programming language is born. It seems so accidental, but it obviously tapped into something that so many people needed.
That's how it is with innovation. Sometimes the best solutions come from solving problems that seem really simple. Lerdorf's personal homepage tools, that's what PHP was called at first. It gave people a way to make web pages dynamic. Back then, that was huge.
Yeah, it was revolutionary. So personal homepage tools became PHP, Hypertext Preprocessor. It's a recursive acronym, which is kind of nerdy, I guess. But it tells you what PHP is all about, processing code to make web pages in real time. But let's be honest, those early versions of PHP were, well, a little rough.
That's one way to put it. The big change came with PHP 3. Thanks to Andy Gutmans and Zeev Saraski, they rewrote the core engine. It was a huge turning point. They added all these features that made PHP so much stronger and able to grow. It's really the foundation for how popular it became.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the giants of the web. WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, they all run on PHP, and they each have a huge part of the internet. I mean, that says a lot, right? What was it about PHP that made it so perfect for these content management systems?
Well, it's a few things. First, PHP integrates really well with HTML. It just made sense to use it for building web pages. Instead of having different files for logic and how the page looks, you could just put PHP code right into the HTML. It made development so much easier.
So it's like PHP just understood HTML from the beginning.
Exactly. But it's more than just that. PHP is also great at interacting with databases. It gives you these really powerful tools to connect to a database and work with the data. And that's super important for CMS platforms because they use databases to store and manage all their content.
Right, because with the CMS, it's all about managing and showing content that changes all the time. So you need that strong connection to the database.
Okay, so PHP was easy to use, good with databases, but what else made it so big?
Oh, don't forget it was open source. PHP being free to use was huge, especially back then. Developers, people just messing around, even big companies, they all loved that it was so accessible. It made PHP a real community language. That open source aspect is so important. It created this whole spirit of collaboration around PHP. So you had all these resources, libraries, and the supportive community, which is still going strong today. But let's talk about what PHP actually does, like under the hood. Because I think sometimes people hear about PHP and they're like, okay, but what does it do?
Yeah, I get that. At its core, PHP is all about server-side scripting. It runs on the web server, and it takes requests from the client's browser and then creates the content that gets sent back. So when you go to a website built with PHP, you're not just seeing static HTML files. You're seeing what the PHP code generated on the server.
So PHP is like the secret chef in the kitchen of the web, whipping up all this dynamic content behind the scenes. It's not just about showing information, it's about making things interactive. But how does PHP actually make things interactive? Is it just about connecting to databases?
That's part of it. But PHP's real power is that it can handle so many different tasks. It can process forms, manage user sessions, send emails, talk to external APIs, work with files on the server, and a whole lot more. It's a really versatile tool for building dynamic web experiences that are actually engaging.
And it does all that while being super compatible. PHP works on almost every major operating system. Windows, Mac OS, Linux, it doesn't care. And it works with popular web servers like Apache and Nginx. That adaptability is a big part of why PHP is everywhere, right?
Absolutely. PHP running on different platforms made it a really practical choice for developers and businesses. It meant you weren't stuck with specific hardware or software. That flexibility was and still is a major strength of PHP.
But it's not just about running in different places. PHP also has this really rich standard library. It's full of pre-built functions that make common tasks so easy. Need to work with strings arrays dates or the file system? PHP's got you covered. All these built-in tools save developers tons of time and effort.
It's like having a toolbox full of ready-made solutions. Instead of starting from scratch, every time you can use these pre-built functions to speed things up.
Okay, so we've got a language that's versatile, compatible, comes with all these handy tools. But let's be real, no language is perfect. PHP has its quirks and maybe even some baggage.
True. Every language has its good and bad sides, and PHP is no different. In the next part, we'll take a closer look at both sides. We'll explore the advantages and the disadvantages of PHP. This will help you understand why some people criticize PHP, but also why it's still important in the web development world.
Sounds good. I'm ready to dig deeper.
Great, let's do it.
All right, so we've talked about how PHP has this long history and it's like a major player in web development. But like any veteran, it's had to face some tough critics. Some developers even say it's, a bit outdated.
Yeah, there's this idea that PHP is stuck in the past, like it's weighed down by old code and bad habits. But I think that's just looking at the surface. You got to dig deeper to really understand what it can do.
Okay, so let's open that book then. What are some of the things people criticize about PHP? Where does it fall short?
One of the biggest ones is security. PHP has this reputation for being vulnerable to attacks, like SQL injection and cross-site scripting, especially if you don't follow best practices really carefully. And, some of that flexibility we were talking about before, that was a strength, but it also caused some problems. The loose typing and the way functions were named, sometimes it wasn't consistent. It led to code that was hard to maintain and debug, especially on big projects.
So PHP's flexibility, which made it so popular at first, it could also make the code messy and create security risks if developers weren't careful. Kind of a double-edged sword.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that those criticisms are often about older versions of PHP and outdated coding practices. The language has come a long way. It's added things like stricter type hinting and better error handling to deal with those issues.
So it's like PHP has been learning from its mistakes and cleaning up its act.
Exactly. PHP 8 especially was a huge step towards modernization. But even with all that, PHP still has to compete with these newer languages that were designed for how we build websites today. Languages like Node.js and Python, they've gotten really popular. People think they're more elegant and faster and better suited for the kind of applications everyone wants to build now.
Okay, so we've got the criticisms on the table. PHP's had its security problems, some quirks in its design, and it's got these trendy newcomers breathing down its neck. But I feel like there's more to this story. What's keeping PHP going strong despite all that?
Well, first of all, don't underestimate how widespread PHP is.
Yeah.
It's estimated that PHP powers almost 80% of all websites. That's massive. And it's not just old systems clinging to outdated technology.
Wait, 80%? That's a lot of websites. I knew PHP was popular, but I didn't realize it was that dominant. So it's not just old websites barely hanging on.
Not at all. PHP is still a really practical and relevant choice for lots of applications today. Look at WordPress, for example. It's not just a blogging platform anymore. It's become a full-fledged CMS. It can power really complex websites, from e-commerce stores to online magazines, and it's all built on PHP.
So PHP is the engine behind this giant content management system that just keeps evolving and getting more powerful. That's impressive.
It is, and it's not just WordPress. E-commerce platforms like Magento and WooCommerce, those are built on PHP too. And they're powering a huge chunk of online businesses. They handle everything from product catalogs and shopping carts to secure payment processing, all thanks to PHP's robust functionality and the huge ecosystem of extensions and plugins.
So PHP isn't just about blogs and simple websites. It's handling the complexities of online businesses and powering the e-commerce world. That's not something I would have thought of before this deep dive.
That's the thing about PHP. It's often working behind the scenes, quietly making the web experiences we take for granted possible. But it goes beyond those high-profile examples too. PHP is also incredibly versatile for building web applications, from project management tools to CRM systems, even custom-built enterprise software.
It sounds like PHP is a lot more adaptable than people realize. It's not just for building simple websites. It can handle complex applications and business logic too.
Absolutely. And with frameworks like Laravel and Symfony, building those complex applications gets even easier and more enjoyable. They provide structure, best practices, and pre-built components that streamline development. So PHP is a viable option even for large-scale projects.
So it's not just PHP itself, it's the whole ecosystem that's grown around it, the frameworks, libraries, and tools. They all contribute to PHP staying relevant in the modern web development world.
Exactly. The PHP ecosystem is huge and active. It's always changing to meet the needs of web developers. And remember we talked about API development. Well, PHP is great for building APIs using RESTful principles. It lets you create connections between different applications and systems, so data can flow smoothly and they can integrate with each other.
I see. So PHP can be the glue that holds different parts of the web together, making sure applications and services can talk to each other. like a universal translator for the web.
Yeah, you could say that.
Hmm.
PHP's role in API development is crucial now that everything's so interconnected. Data has to flow between platforms and devices without any hiccups. And don't forget about automation. PHP is fantastic for automating those repetitive tasks on the server, like processing data, sending emails, or managing files.
Okay, so we've gone from PHP being criticized for being outdated to it powering e-commerce giants, but building complex applications, connecting systems through APIs, and even automating tasks. Sounds like PHP is a lot busier than people realize. But with all these different uses, where does PHP really shine? What are its strengths that make it stand out?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of why PHP is such an enduring force in web development. But before we get into those strengths, let's take a little detour. Let's explore the world of PHP frameworks. They play a big role in how PHP is used and how its capabilities are expanded.
Frameworks, huh? I'm intrigued. I've heard of Laravel and Symfony, but what else is out there? And how do they all fit into the PHP world?
Oh, you're in for a treat. The world of PHP frameworks is really diverse and fascinating. Each framework has its own philosophy, its strengths, its weaknesses. It gives developers lots of choices to find the right one for their needs and their project.
Okay, you've got me hooked. Let's dive into this world of PHP frameworks and see what hidden gems we can find. Maybe we'll even discover the perfect framework for our next project. Okay, so we're back. I'm ready to jump into those PHP frameworks. You were saying how each framework has its own personality. That's so interesting to me. It's picking the right tool for the job. But here, the tools are these powerful frameworks that change how we build with PHP.
Yeah, exactly. Like you wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb, right? Yeah. Same thing here. You wouldn't use a framework that's meant for huge, complex applications if you're just making a simple website. Each one has its own strengths and weaknesses and ways of doing things. Understanding those can really make a difference in how you work.
Okay, let's see what's in this PHP framework toolbox. We've talked about Laravel and Symfony. They seem to be the most popular. What makes them so special?
Well, Laravel is known for having this really elegant syntax. It focuses on making things easy for developers. And it has this big ecosystem of tools and packages. People love it for its batteries included approach. Basically, it comes with a lot of pre-built stuff for common tasks, things like routing, database interaction, authentication. So it's great for developers who want to get started quickly. They can focus on building your application instead of getting bogged down in the details.
So Laravel is like the all-inclusive resort of PHP frameworks. Everything you need is right there waiting for you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Now, SimCity is a bit different. It's more like a foundation or a set of reusable components. It's super flexible and modular. Developers can pick and choose just the components they need. So it's great for big, complex projects where you need a lot of control and customization.
So if Laravel is the all-inclusive resort, Symfony is more like a set of really high-quality building blocks, and you can put them together any way you want.
Exactly. And those are two of the big ones. There are so many other cool PHP frameworks out there. Each one is designed for different needs and preferences. Like CodeIgniter, for example, is known for being simple and fast. So it's a good choice for smaller projects or if you like a lightweight approach. And then there's Zen Framework, which is now called Laminus. It's really robust and mature. People often use it for enterprise-level applications where stability and scalability are super important.
It's amazing how many different frameworks there are. It seems like there's a perfect PHP framework for any project, but how do you even choose? It's kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be. But that's why it's so important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each one. And you have to think about your own preferences and how you like to code. Some frameworks are more strict than others. They make you follow certain rules and ways of doing things. Others are more flexible. They give you more freedom to structure your code how you want.
So it's not just about the technical stuff, it's also about finding a framework that fits your style and how you like to develop.
Exactly. It's like choosing a musical instrument. A good musician can make beautiful music on anything, but they'll naturally gravitate towards the instrument that feels best to them. It's the same with PHP frameworks.
I like that. It makes picking a framework feel more creative and less like a technical decision. But let's switch gears for a minute. What about the future of PHP? We've talked about its history, its strengths, its weaknesses, even all these frameworks. But where does PHP fit in now that web development is changing so fast? Is it going to disappear or can it keep up?
That's the big question. And the answer isn't just yes or no. PHP's popularity has definitely gone down a bit, especially compared to new languages like Node.js and Python. But it's definitely not dying. In fact, I'd say PHP is going through a kind of revival. because it can adapt, it keeps evolving, and it has this amazing community supporting it.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more about this PHP revival. What's making it happen? How is PHP staying competitive with all these new languages trying to take over?
Well, one big thing is that PHP is embracing modern web development. Remember all those criticisms we talked about? The security problems, the inconsistent coding practices, the performance issues. The PHP community has been working hard to fix those things.
So PHP is learning from its past and changing to keep up with the web.
Exactly. PHP 8 was a big part of that. It made things a lot faster, like with a just-in-time compiler, which really speeds up how code runs. And it brought in stricter typing, better error handling, bunch of new features that make PHP more robust, more secure, and just more fun to use.
It sounds like PHP is getting rid of its old baggage and becoming more modern and efficient. But is that enough to keep up with how fast web development is moving?
It's a good start, but there's more. PHP is also getting on board with the bigger trends in software development, things like cloud computing, microservices, containerization, and serverless architectures. These things are changing how we build and deploy applications. And PHP is changing too, so it can work with these technologies.
Well, explain that a little more. How is PHP adapting to these trends? It seems like a big jump from traditional server-side scripting to all this modern cloud stuff.
It is a big change, but
Yeah.
PHP is doing it. Now you can easily deploy and manage PHP applications on cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. Frameworks like Laravel are using microservices, so developers can build modular applications that can be scaled and deployed separately. And PHP works great with containerization tools like Docker, so it's easy to package and deploy applications in a consistent way.
So PHP is becoming cloud-ready, microservice-friendly, and containerization compatible. It's like it's transforming into this lean, mean, modern development machine.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And all this is happening because of the amazing PHP community. They're always pushing the limits of what PHP can do. They're making new tools, frameworks, and libraries. So PHP keeps getting better and stays relevant in the modern web development world.
It's really cool to see this kind of resilience and adaptability, especially for a language that people often say is outdated. It's like PHP is proving everyone wrong. But with all these changes, where does PHP really fit in this new world of web development? What's its special niche, its strengths that make it different from everything else?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what makes PHP so enduring. While newer languages might be better at certain things, like building real-time applications or systems that work with tons of data, PHP is still the king of web content management. WordPress, Drupal, Joomla. They power most of the websites in the world, and they're all built on PHP. That shows how easy PHP is to use, how flexible it is, and how well it works with web technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
So PHP is sticking with what it's good at, using its strong foundation in the web to stay on top in the CMS world. It's a good strategy considering how much of the internet runs on these content management platforms.
Exactly. And it's not just about content management. PHP is also really good for building e-commerce platforms, web applications, and APIs. It has all these mature frameworks and libraries. Plus, it's focused on server-side processing. That makes it a practical choice for building dynamic web experiences that are driven by data.
It sounds like PHP has found its place in web development. It's not trying to be everything. It's focusing on its strengths, using its experience and its amazing community to create solutions that actually work for businesses and developers.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. PHP isn't chasing the latest fads or trying to reinvent itself all the time. It's a mature language that's been tested and proven, and it keeps evolving to meet the needs of the web. But it's also staying true to its roots and its core principles.
It just goes to show that sometimes the best tools are the ones that have been around for a while, the ones that have been refined and improved over time. PHP might not be the flashiest or the most popular language anymore, but it's a reliable workhorse that powers so much of the web, quietly and efficiently behind the scenes.
I like that. And I think that's what we should remember from our deep dive into PHP. It's often underestimated and overlooked. But it's still a really powerful language. It has a rich history, a vibrant present, and a future full of possibilities. So the next time you see PHP, remember that there's more to it than you might think. It's worth exploring, worth understanding, and worth appreciating for what it's done for the web.
Absolutely. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has made you curious about PHP. Maybe you'll want to learn more about it, explore all its little details, and find its hidden gems. Or maybe you'll just have a new appreciation for this unsung hero of web development. Whatever you do, we encourage you to keep an open mind. Embrace all the different options in web development and never underestimate the power of a language that has shaped the internet we know and love. Until next time, happy coding.